Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on education. In this video we're going to look at the work of Ivan Illich on education. Ivan Illich, an Austrian philosopher and social critic, published Deschooling Society in 1971, presenting a radical critique of institutionalized education. Illich argued that formal schooling often serves to reproduce inequality, social control and dependency, rather than genuinely fostering learning, personal development or social justice. His ideas have had a lasting influence on critical and alternative approaches to education. Illich observed that modern education systems had become overly bureaucratized, compulsory and rigid, privileging conformity and credentialism over genuine learning. He argued that schools maintain social hierarchies by privileging those who already have resources or cultural capital. They also limit creativity and curiosity by enforcing standard curricula and testing. They encourage passive learning and dependence on authority figures and produce learned helplessness, making individuals reliant on formal institutions to access knowledge and opportunities. Illich famously described this as a society schooled to be obedient, where the formal structures of education function to socialize individuals into existing power relations, rather than empowering them to think critically or independently. A central distinction in Illich's work is between learning and schooling. Learning, he argued, is a natural human process driven by curiosity, experience and interaction with others. Schooling, in contrast, institutionalizes learning, often creating artificial hierarchies, competition and credentialism. Illich proposed that society should focus on learning networks rather than schools. These networks would be allowed to access mentors and peers, learn at their own pace, engage with knowledge relevant to their interests and social needs, and bypass the rigid, age-based and credential-focused system of formal schooling. Illich was particularly critical of credentialism, the idea that educational certificates and qualifications are more important than actual knowledge or skills. In his view, the obsession with qualifications reinforces social inequality, as those from privileged backgrounds can accumulate credentials more easily. It also creates artificial barriers to employment and social mobility, and diverts attention from meaningful learning and practical experience. He argued that the education system increasingly measures and sorts people, rather than fostering genuine growth. Illich proposed alternative models of education, notably learning webs, which would connect learners with available educational resources, mentors and peers. This would allow flexible, self-directed learning, with a focus on practical and socially relevant skills rather than standardized curricula. Illich also argued this would promote community-based learning rather than centralized institutional control. These ideas were radical at the time, challenging the assumption that schools were necessary for socialization, knowledge acquisition, or citizenship. Illich's critique is explicitly political and egalitarian. He saw compulsory schooling as part of a larger system of social control, which maintained inequality and limited individuals' freedom to pursue meaningful knowledge or participate fully in society. He also linked institutionalized schooling to economic inefficiency. Societies invested heavily in schools, yet formal schooling often failed to produce productive, skilled or empowered citizens. By promoting informal, networked and self-directed learning, Illich argued society could achieve more equitable and effective educational outcomes. In evaluation of Illich's work, he provides a radical critique of the limitations and inequalities of formal schooling, emphasizing self-directed learning, curiosity and social relevance. His work also inspires alternative educational models and movements, highlighting the role of schools in maintaining social hierarchies and reproducing inequality. However, Illich's work is not without its critics. It is seen as being highly idealistic, as not all informal learning structures are feasible on a large scale. It also lacks empirical evidence to support claims about the superiority of learning networks, and critics of Illich suggest that he may underestimate the role that schools play in socialization, civic education, and access to structured knowledge. Furthermore, implementation of Illich's ideas in modern society is challenging, particularly under standardized testing regimes and national curricula. However, Illich's ideas are highly relevant to AQA A Level Sociology students who are studying education. As a conflict theory, Illich argues that schools reproduce inequality and serve elite interests. From an interactionist perspective, Illich's ideas question how schooling shapes identity, behaviour and expectations. And in terms of alternative education, he explores deschooling, democratic education and lifelong learning. Students can use Illich to critique functionalist and human capital perspectives that present education as universally beneficial and evaluate policies that assume formal schooling is the only path to skills or social mobility. Students may also be able to use Illich to discuss alternatives to traditional schooling in essays on equality, policy or global development. Illich's Deschooling Society provides a radical critique of formal education, challenging the assumptions that schools inherently promote learning, equality or social good. By distinguishing between schooling and learning, highlighting the inequalities perpetuated by credentialism, and proposing learning networks as alternatives, Illich offers a vision of education focused on empowerment, autonomy and social relevance. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on education, looking at the work of Ivan Illich on education. Thanks for watching.